Okay, let's begin with an inventory of the necessary tools that we'll need to accomplish this float modification. We'll start with a power drill. Here I have a foam block that I use to organize my floats once they've been modified. I have a miter box and miter saw, some files, some marker flags, sanding sponge, and some sandpaper. I have some items here that you have not seen in a modified float video before, and we'll get to that a little bit later as we sport tune our modified floats. I have lineman's pliers, which I'll use to cut the rod down to the length I desire. I of course have a drill. Some of my favorite floats, including the loafer, the green bobber, and the crystal avons from Drennan. You'll see that I have the Drennan float caps. In this bag I have some cut down silicone tubing, gas lines used for gas powered remote control cars, which you can pick up in any hobby store. So we're going to start off with the miter box and miter saw. What we're going to start with is cutting the plastic stem off of the float. We're going to eyeball it and leave about that much material, just enough that we can securely get our stem in and have material for it to actually hold on to. I'm using a miter box. It doesn't take much, just a couple passes underneath the blade, and the stem will be cut nice and square for you, and if it isn't, we'll sand it a little bit. That's it. You can tell that the angle isn't quite as straight as I would prefer. So we'll square it up. This real coarse sandpaper makes the job quite easy. And there we have it. Now, as an extra precaution, I'm going to sand the edge of the cut so that it doesn't have any sharp edges that may cut into and chafe our line while we're fishing. And I have a sufficient bevel on there. Now it's ready for the next step, which will be to drill for the stem. I've already pre-inserted my drill bit into the drill, and I'm going to try to get this into the center of the plastic as best I can. I'm going to take a look, and that hole is fairly close to center. And I'll show you a trick. This trick will allow you to get the hole drilled on center. Start the drill up, and you see that I've gone in there maybe about 3/16 of an inch, and let it spin. If you get a lot of wobble, it's telling you, it's an indicator that you're not on center, or you're not as close to on center as you would prefer. So grab the float, and as it dips down, just give it a little upward pressure to recenter the drill bit. And look at how much more truer that spins. That way you know you're on center and you can proceed to drill all the way in. Test it again. Looks real good. Okay, I'm done. I'm going to use my lineman's pliers. And cut the stem down. And when I do this, I have a bit of material here that definitely needs to be sanded down. It's extra sharp and it will certainly cut your line. So I'm going to use my sanding block just to get off the extreme sharp edges. And then that file that we spoke about earlier, use it to get that sharp edge off and flatten this stem down. And while I'm at it, I'll check the other edge to make sure that it doesn't have any sharp edges on it that may cut my line. And I'll just rotate the stainless steel stem, or I'm sorry, in this case it's just steel stem, and give it a quick file. Okay, after I've done that, I'm going to go back to the sandpaper. and in this case is extremely coarse 80 grit sandpaper. Okay, and then to the sanding pad. Give it an inspection. Repeat on the other end. And you can see how rounded that is and how there are no sharp edges. That's exactly what we're aiming for. Okay, now when we insert this into the end of the float, because I've drilled with the exact diameter that the stem is in itself, it goes in pretty well, and it probably would stay, but I don't want to risk the fact that it may come apart. I have had, in extreme cold temperatures, the stems separate from the float body itself. In an effort to not have this separate when I'm on the water making adjustments to float depth or whatever, I'm going to follow Floatman's tip, which is an excellent suggestion to get this to permanently stick in there. You're going to take your lighter and heat up the end of the stem. Get it nice and warm. And this will melt itself into the stem, and it will not come free. It's there for a long, long time. Hopefully a couple thousand fish. Alright, we could stop here and leave this float like just about every modified float tutorial that you've seen on the net, whether it be pictorial or video based. But we have a sport tune float modification to do here, and that's where the lead core, or the lead wire line comes in. I'm using 0.025 lead wire. You can purchase this at a fly tying supply shop, and it's used commonly in the fly tying community to weight down streamers and other flies, nymphs, and that sort of thing. I'm going to take off a section about this long, and I'm going to wrap it near the base of the plastic. Wrap it nice and tight. And for this type of float, which is a 3.5 grammer crystal Avon, that amount of lead is sufficient. Okay, then it's nice and tight. I'm going to squeeze it down, push it into the bottom of the float, and to secure it I could use super glue, I could use Zap-A-Gap, but since I use clear nail polish on a lot of my streamer flies when I'm building up the head or I'm putting bug eyes on it, I will use it. It's readily available for me. So I'm going to also put a decent amount on here so that it seals the lead into the float stem here. And if there is a possibility of some sharper edges with the lead wire that I've wrapped around here, it'll smooth them out. Okay. Now, all that's left is to let this dry overnight. Apply your float caps and your silicone tubing, and what you'll end up with is a float just like this, except you'll have the added benefit of lead weight right at the base to stand it upright in the water and make it a high performance float. It'll save you a little bit more shot down below on your main line, and it'll make this stand up immediately when it hits the water. So that's the high performance modified Drennan float from Float Fishing Connection.